Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join me for another army creation video. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and today we're going to be playing with one of the Elven factions, that being the realm of Mirkwood. So without any further ado, let's take a look at some cool armies, and we'll talk a little bit about Mirkwood and the philosophy in general that we've taken when it comes to balancing them. So let's start this actually by talking a little bit about what Mirkwood does well, and then we'll move on to the things that they don't do so well and some of their shortcomings. Now, the obvious benefit to playing as Mirkwood is that you have some very strong archer companies. The Theony Tower in particular, actually let's talk a little bit about them and sort of the idea behind this unit. Now, I think it is nearly essential that any Mirkwood player bring these guys as the core of their archer force. Most archers are limited to 2, these guys are not, they are limited to 3, and over other elven archers of similar cost. Most of the other elven archers running about 600, but these guys are a bit more expensive, and I'll tell you why. They have more armor, more melee skill, more attack, more missile damage, they're faster, they've got more morale, and they can also hide anywhere, which is a big boon. And being wood elven archers, they are a bit more accurate than some of their other cousins. So you get all of that for a slightly increased price tag, which I think is pretty reasonable. It's all around a very good unit that can be used as medium infantry after the fact. They are at least nearly as good in melee as the Norityrno warriors, for example. They've got similar skill, they got less armor and a bit less damage, but still a really, really strong unit that's can be taken as the core of your force and supplemented with some of the other skirmishers, like the Hirdi Peng, for example, or the Adadir Talman Lank, or you can simply take them on their own and supplement them with some of the mounted skirmishers. And these two units working in tandem can do quite well and present a pretty serious skirmishing menace to your opponents that will also save you a little bit of money as well. They're a bit more expensive than, say, the Hirdi Peng, but they are a bit faster, and then you don't really have to. Then you have some extra units of cavalry, and you can potentially save a little bit of money for your front line by limiting your skirmishers to merely those 2 units. But yeah, so archers, they're very good at them. Hirdi units, or just units with Hirdi in them, are generally about 6 armor, so a little bit more lightly armored than say Lothlorien heavy archers, for example, but they do have higher melee defense values and quite respectable shield values as well in terms of the Hirdi Elf and the Hirdi Ek. So yeah, very, very strong on the skirmish side of things, and you can supplement them with some of the other nice little goodies here, like the Maithiri Lascallan, who are a decent but expensive elven javelin unit, just because Mirkwood doesn't really specialize in javelins. So Linden, for example, can do a javelin thing a lot better than Mirkwood does, but if you need these, they actually fit in really nicely to a balanced army comp, which I'll show you guys. And I want to draw your attention to one more unit here, which is a bit of a hybrid heavy infantry shock unit. That being the Adadir Talman Lank, who have very high skill for an axe unit especially, and 16 AP damage, a ton of charge. These guys are nasty and can take down some pretty high tier opponents in close quarters with that high melee skill and with that high damage in AP. They have a little bit less ammunition, but they do have higher range and can hide anywhere. So it's a useful unit that's really designed around just doing damage quickly at range, and then throwing themselves into melee before they can take too many casualties. And yeah, they can do a lot of work there. But let's talk a little bit about some of Mirkwood's shortcomings. Obviously, it's their armor. Their lower numbers. Their numbers aren't, I would say, on average, they're a little bit higher than a faction like Lothlorien or Imladris, but lower than that of Lindon, who has some cheaper units that they can use to pretty great effect and feel quite a lot of. So they kind of like are this middle child in between Linden and Lothlorien. They've got less focus on armor and like being heavy kind of frontline units than Imladris and Lothlorien, but they've got a different kind of skirmish focus than Linden, and they're a little bit more expensive than Linden, just because of how much better their units generally tend to be than their Linden counterparts when it comes to melee, for example. So yeah, that just about sums it up, I think, there for Mirkwood. So let's take a look at some of their army comps. Now, I mentioned one earlier, and this one is a favorite of mine. I like to bring 2 units of the Rekbin Talman Lank because they are spear cavalry and really high melee skill on them as well. So if you were to throw these against, say, the Imladris Guardians, for example, or the Imladris Sentinels, that's their mounted silver cavalry unit, these guys will actually beat them. quite handily, in fact, usually with about 15 or 20 men left in the unit. These are both units that cost the same, and yeah, so these guys can be a little bit more efficient in cav to cav, and that's just because they don't have nearly as many cavalry options as a faction like Commanders does. So I find it's best to use the Rexpin on like defensively in this kind of build, in this particular army, and just use them to defend your flanks in tandem with some of your other infantry units, for example, and you can do pretty well if you can force an infantry fight as Mirkwood. But in any case, so a couple units there of the Rexpin on the flank, one unit of Dagnilrim Erin, because they are so useful at fighting wargs, and that way you don't have to commit your Rexpin like uniquely to fighting wargs, who will probably beat them because wargs are very, very strong cavalry superiority units. Let me move on to bringing 3 units of our Theony Tower, like I said, as the core of our skirmish fight. And this is for playing against a faction that maybe you would want to bring a lot of bows against. This is the kind of army I think that could do reasonably well against Dale, match them quite easily in a skirmish fights, and yeah, hold their own for quite a while, and still have a lot of infantry left over. So, a couple units of, let's see here, let's bring 4th Enemy added, just for some anti-cav and to defend our front line. You can also bring 3 units of Hiri Alf, a couple units of Heathly Tower, and that's going to give you a nice, really balanced army with some solid infantry core here in the form of your Hiri Alf, backed up with some Heathly Tower. And then you've got some Thandrim Eadin that you can use to defend your flanks and your front line from getting charged down by lancers. And you've got a solid number here of bowmen. Now, of course, if you're playing against something a little more heavily armored, where maybe your bows won't be as useful, the dwarves come to mind. You can take a couple units of Maitha Last Gallon, swap them out for your Hiri Peng instead of them, and yeah, you've still got a solid amount of skirmishers there. 3 units of the Theony Tower and the Dagion Eadin, which can be used very, very effectively in flanking attacks and stuff like that. And you got a little bit of extra AP and potentially some more anti-cavalry power there if needed. So altogether, I think that's a pretty decent army. But let's look a little bit more at ambushing with Mirkwood. Now, they do have a fair amount of units that can hide, which can potentially be useful. I didn't talk too much about it during their strengths, when I was talking about their strengths, just because ambushes in Medieval 2 are very hard to pull off, and it can be very hit or miss to base a strategy around being able to ambush. Now, sometimes it can be really useful, and other times it fails miserably, so it's less of a strength and more of a tactical option that's available to Mirkwood as much as it is available to a lot of other factions. I mean, you've got some hidden units. You can use them in ambushes, but it's not necessary to play as Mirkwoods. They really do kind of focus a little bit more, in my opinion, around their skirmishers and things like that. But ambushing can be extremely useful as Mirkwood as it can be with just about any other army. But that being said, let's look a little bit more here at something of an ambush army that's fairly skirmish heavy, probably. So we'll take a couple units of the Maitha Last Gallon, a couple units of Gwath Ead and Gallon, who are both solid like mid-range skirmish units. I think they all have AP missiles, which can be really, really useful. We'll also take a couple Theony Tower, 1 Delupang Yemendwir, and that's a nice little ambush army there. A lot of these units can hide. The only ones that can't are the Maitha Last Gallon. And then you're going to need some cavalry to defend these guys with, so I think a couple units of the mounted bowmen are going to be useful for this as well. And then you're going to need to cheap out a little bit on your front line, so you can take a couple units there, see what that gets you. I don't think we'll have quite enough left over for another company of heavy infantry, which is a little bit unfortunate. So let's see what we can remove here. I'm not sure 2 units of the Dagnyon Irkiadin are going to be absolutely necessary. So let's take a bit more of a numbers kind of oriented front line. And let's see here. Now, what we could do is eschew a company of Mengel Eadin and give ourselves some Hiri Long. Oh no, apparently we can't get all as many Hiri Long there as I would want. Well, in that case, we can take some Heathly Tower, who are, again, another ambush unit here. And you've got a lot of options for hiding units and things like that. And you've still got a reasonably capable front line. I mean, obviously you're going to have to sacrifice that a little bit, and a lot of these units are also quite good in melee as well. So you will rely on your skirmishing units to help supplement your front line as is needed. But yeah, it does really give you a lot of options here in terms of an ambush, which can be useful in team fights. Now, this isn't an army I would take in a 1v1 situation, probably. Maybe I would, depending on who I was fighting. Could do okay against some of the Orcish factions, although if it's one of the Orcish factions and a player that tends to go heavy on the trolls, this army would, I think, really suffer. They might do okay if you can use your Gwathia and Galen and your Maethar Elas Galen fairly well, and use them to take down the trolls quickly before they collapse your front line. But again, this is more of a kind of a niche army where ambushing is going to be useful for you. And again, team fight, that's also kind of that's the way you want to play that game. So let's look a little bit more at a siege battle. Let's say we'll do a defensive siege, and then we'll do an offensive siege, and then we'll do one more army comp after that. And yeah, then we'll probably call it there. So for a defensive siege, you got a couple options here in terms of your elite picks, which I like to start with. I would definitely take the Iar Athaliani Nanwaith and hold them back for that final stand when they can be really, really useful. And I would debate between taking the Aradir Hamanlang to give me a little bit of extra AP depending on who I'm fighting, and the Iar Argoe Nanwaith. These two units working in tandem together in the last stand are very, very deadly indeed, and you don't have to spend money on cavalry, so you can kind of, well, you don't necessarily have to. I mean, you can if you want to as a defender. I've explained previously why I tend to not. But yeah, so if you're not going to bring cavalry, then bringing these two expensive units together is definitely an option for you, because you don't have to spend all that extra money. So in a siege, you're going to want some rangers, and you're definitely going to want a unit of javelins here. These both kind of do the same thing. The rangers have a lot more longevity and are generally stronger against lightly armored units, whereas the Maethar Elas Galen can do a fair amount of damage to armored companies that maybe the Lepeng Yemenware won't be able to damage quite so severely. So you've got options here for either kind of situation. I like to bring them both. We could bring another unit, but they get expensive, and we're going to want to have a fair amount of infantry for the siege. So again, 30 tower as the core. Nothing really terribly new there. And you're probably going to want some higher mass units. So I would bring the Hiediek for holding down choke points. They have shield wall, for example, which some of the lower tier spearmen lack. So they're a little bit better for dealing with mass pushes, since that shield wall gives them a fairly substantial boost to mass. So a couple units there to help you hold the line. It's going to be useful. Some Hethel Tower is very, very nice to have indeed. And let's see here. Numbers are also a fun thing to have in a siege. So some Megaliadin to back up your Hethel Tower. And we've got about enough here for either some more bow units or some more heavy infantry, depending on kind of what your strategy is going to be. So you could bring 2 units of the Hiedilang, who are very, very good indeed. Now there's kind of a bit of a discrepancy here, I'm sure, for many people when it comes to the Hethel Tower versus the Hiedilang. Now the Hethel unit, I believe the Hethel Tower have 15 morale. Their card hasn't been changed yet. So yeah, so there is actually a 3 morale difference between the Hiedilang and the Hethel Tower, and of course there is I believe 1 melee skill and 2 armor, and these guys have a little bit less speed as well, so a little bit less speed there. But very, very similar units all around, and it really comes down to kind of what you want to have. The another unit is AP, so they don't have that going for them, but the Hiedilang can tar pit a little bit better than the Hethel Tower. Actually, the Hethel Tower have 13 melee skill. Yeah, these cards are confusing me too. So they've got 4 armor and 13 melee skill, whereas the Hethel or the Hiedilang have 3 extra melee skill, 2 extra armor, yeah, it's basically their big draw there is that they can do the Hethel Tower's job a little bit better, stand up to arrow fire a bit more, and are all around just a bit of a tankier unit. So I like to bring them both in tandem together. These guys are a little bit cheaper, but these guys are tankier and can stand up to elites a little bit better than, say, the Hethel Tower can. So it's really down to you. You could bring 2 units of them as well, or if you feel like your shock infantry needs are met, and you want to bring some more archers, go with the Hiri Peng. They are like the little brother to the Hiri Long. Not as good. Missing a lot of damage there and some extra melee skill as well, but they are bowmen, so really it's down to you. This is an army that I would totally use as a support army, however, in a siege. I find that that's really the best role for the elves to occupy in a siege. Either attacking or defending is for them to play a support role and use some of their excellent skirmishers and things like that to support waves of orcs dying in their stead, for example. But let's look at units for an offensive siege, which is always a good thing to have. So you're going to want to go for numbers in an offensive siege. So let's get our basic units there of the Thyrny Tower. We're going to want probably 1 unit of Elven Javies, and we're going to want like a first wave. So Mirkwood, not a bad choice there. Could bring up to 4 of them there for the price increase. So we'll play with 4 for now. If we need to get rid of them, if it favors something else, we'll get rid of 1. A couple units there of the Hethely Tower, very good for capitalizing on any gains the Mirkwood may make, and they support each other very well. You'll probably want 1 unit of cavalry, just in case, at the very least, and the Yarbran Inanwaith are a good unit to have. 2 HP, they are spear camps, so they can hold their own against other cavalrymen quite well, especially Lancer bodyguards, like if you're fighting Gondor or Harad, for example. This is stand up to the Black Serpents and the Gandalf's Retinue bodyguard very well, and can beat them quite easily. And then you're going to want some of your more heavy-hitting units that you can use for capitalizing on gains, and you want to be able to have something to throw at your enemy in the late game. So 3 units actually of the Hidi Alth. Not a bad way to go with that. And then you've got some elite picks here, which, I mean, you can go for a couple units of the Gwathia and Galen, who are decent at being supporting infantry, and they've also got their throwing daggers that they toss, which can be useful. You could go for something a little bit more assault-oriented, like 2 units of Hiri Long. Or you can go for a company of Yarathalion Inanwaith, who are pretty good. But I recommend going for a little bit more numbers in this instance. Let's see what we got here. You could even mix it up a bit with some added with Amon Lank, who also count as shock infantry. And then go for another company there of the Hiri Long. And then you've got a little bit of extra money to do with as you see fit, which I would give to the Yarbran Inanwaith, because if there's the enemy cavalry, you're going to be relying on them quite a lot. All right, so now let's do 1 more army composition, something unique. Let's base it around the traditional kind of Sylvan style of warfare, that being axes and spears and bows. So let's take yes, that will be our core infantry. I'll also take Roexbin Yaman Lank. 1, 2, 3 archers. Got a fair amount of numbers here too. And then we've got some options left over here, nearly about 3,000 that we can spend. So in this case, well, I said we would bring axes and such. So we'll get an Arada Amon Lank. And then we can have a couple companies there of the Maethir Ilas Galen. And altogether, this is a pretty decently balanced army. It's a little bit light on your front line, but again, you've got a lot of companies that you can use, or units rather, that you can use to supplement that at need. And of course, then you've certainly got some cavalry superiority there. The Degnirum Irki Eden can deal with even heavy cavalry with their aim missile damage. And then you've got the Ruetbin Yaman Lank, which you can use offensively or defensively according to your needs. And then the Hethely Tower supplementing the Thandrim Yedin is a lot for an enemy to break down. This is, in my opinion, a strong army for a team fight. I would definitely try and link up with my allies again, and have us both support each other, rather than trying to necessarily take my enemy head-on in the field. Although I feel like this army could do that reasonably well, as long as it was willing to delay an engagement for a little while until the skirmishers can really get their money's worth, basically. Like I said, a lot of these units are very fast, so you can use them to to avoid a straight-up fight with an enemy that's slower, like the dwarves or the Udrik units for the orc factions tend to be a little bit slower. Just generally things like that. So yeah, picking your battles with Mirkwood can be a very very prudent way to play this Elven faction indeed. So yeah, let's summarize Mirkwood a little bit here before we sign off. Offensively, they are very strong. Actually, a lot of the changes that we made, especially to Elven ammunition and things like that, and the Hirdipeng's armor, the Hird units in general, their armor values are a little bit lower than, say, the Lothlorien heavy units, because one of the things that we ran into early on in development was that a lot of the Elven factions basically played the same. They were all very shooty, all very stationary, and we've tried to mix that up a little bit, and I think we've had a fair amount of success doing that. But I mean, obviously, the mod is still a work in progress. We're not even at 1.0 yet. But Imladris, for example, is a little bit more fluid, a little bit more cavalry focused, whereas Mirkwood is more archer focused, but nonetheless still fluid, and skirmish tactics will lend themselves very well to a Mirkwood army, obviously, with how many bowmen they can bring. And just trying to bleed your enemy and get them into a position where you are ready to engage is potentially an important part of playing Mirkwood, depending on who you are going up against. But yeah, that's really Mirkwood in a nutshell. They hit hard, they move fast, they are very fast-paced and micro-intensive, and in my opinion, a lot of fun to play. Mirkwood and Imladris are probably tied for my two favorite Elven factions, just because I like their playstyle. I prefer it over that of Linden or Lothlorien, who are a little bit more stationary and a little bit more kind of stand and fire in a lot of ways. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this guide. I hope you found it useful, and I hope it will bring you success in your battles to come. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, everybody. Bye!